Empathy is a critical skill for people in general, and particularly during times like the lockdown when the world is dealing with a pandemic. Now, she's written a book on the subject of empathy. Here it is with me. It's called Softening the Edge. It deals with the question of empathy in business and how a lack of empathy can lead to an economic and a social crisis. She also actually has a breakfast show on the very same subject, and she joins us now live to discuss her new book. Mimi Nicklin, welcome. Thanks so much for your time this morning on the AM Report. And I want to begin with discussing, something that Cal Bruns wrote in the foreword of your book. I quite like it because he talks about an exercise that he's done in problem-solving workshops where literally he will ask people sitting in this workshop to take off their one shoe and then to swap their shoes with the person next to them. It's quite an uncomfortable, I can just imagine, an uncomfortable sort of setting to be in. But that's empathy, isn't it? Literally trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Absolutely. Empathy is at its core that exact ability, being able to stand in the shoes of others, see the world from their eyes and see their context.
So in 2020, what a year it's been. I understand you started writing this book before the pandemic hit. I think you started, you sort of finished the book off in the middle of the lockdown. What would you say has emerged for you in this year, particularly as the reason why empathy is such an important skill?
It's such a valid question because it has changed hugely. When I look back to November 2019, so just 12 months ago, this just wasn't the conversation that the world was having. This wasn't a conversation that the media was covering. And I think that, the shared reality of this year, of what we've all been through together, has just totally changed people's mindsets, their understanding of needing to be connected to others, of needing to have more in their work environments than a paycheck, which is, of course, incredibly important. But it's not the only thing that motivates people, particularly the younger generations that are coming up through our workplaces today.
When you were writing this book, Mimi, did Donald Trump's presidency play a part in part of the conceptualizing when it came to this book?
You know what? It didn't. Not when I was conceptualizing it. I wasn't at all thinking about American politics at that time. However, as the election went on and as the presidency and that whole discussion carried on, and of course, the more Joe Biden talked about empathy and it became the poster word for his campaign, the more I realized I was tapping into something that was not just social and corporate and from a community point of view, but of course that it plays a huge role in politics and in the leadership of our countries as well. So it certainly changed as the year went on.
So talk to us about empathy in leadership, and perhaps let's, as economies around the world try to come to terms with the effects of COVID-19 and the lockdown, what does empathy in leadership look like?
It's a big question, but empathy and leadership, I talk about regenerative leadership. So leadership that focuses on people beyond profit. And the word beyond is incredibly important there because this is not about not making money. We all have to make money. This is a capitalist society. This is about balancing humanism with that capitalism so that we can grow our businesses, but we can also look after the growth and the ability of our people to thrive and to feel very fulfilled in that environment. Because fundamentally, that we're pushing is to grow our businesses, but we have to look after the assets that are such a key part of that. And people often talk about CEOs looking after the bottom line. I would debate that CEOs need to look after the people that look after their bottom line. And that is a very nuanced but critical shift.
I wonder whether the reason why there is this empathy gap that your book talks about, I wonder if it's because people in those leadership positions have a fear that the people who work for them, who work in their businesses, would see sort of empathy being more part of your business model, something that they could take advantage of, if you get my question.
Yeah, I think there is an assumption out there that if you use empathy, you're showing some type of weakness, which is absolutely not the case. And one of my real passions is talking about how empathetic leadership, regenerative leadership, is not a soft skill. it's not an emotional thing. This is a hard skill to execute, but it's also hard to find. And what we know is that when you increase empathy in the workplace, when you increase the levels of emotional intelligence, you see all kinds of growth in productivity, growth in output, growth in profit, growth in performance. So this sort of misunderstanding that perhaps understanding others makes you a less strong leader, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as the data shows, is completely incorrect. The more you understand those around you, the more you can influence and change and impact your business and the business of those that you work with. So it's a misunderstanding, but it's a common one.
Yeah. There's actually a very interesting quote on page 20 as we talk about empathy and leadership. This is the quote, what some of today's greatest leaders share is a natural ability to see people in a way that goes beyond what others see in the same scene. So empathy is not, as you say, a weakness. It's the ability to see and think outside of what perhaps someone else might see.
Absolutely. I think those that have empathetic leadership at their core are showing an ability to really see and hear those around them. It's a data set, and I talk about this all the time. Being able to use empathy is creating data for you to lead more deeply, more effectively, more humanly in order to provoke change. And, there's been many leaders throughout history that have tapped on a similar thing, which is that those that empathize are those that connect, and those that connect are the ones that can help other people grow. So absolutely, it's a superpower, but it's one that we all have.
Yeah. I mean, you've explained it so wonderfully, particularly as it pertains to the benefits for leaders and people in leadership positions in businesses, how it literally can benefit your bottom line as a business. So why are so few businesses and leaders getting it right?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one I get asked all the time. I think there are a couple of reasons. I think when we look at the older generation of leaders, many of them just weren't trained this way. They simply didn't grow up in a business world that valued these skill sets and this approach to business. So it's not habitual, it's not experiential. People haven't been trained in that way. As you mentioned earlier, there are some misconceptions about what it means. As I said, empathy is not about soft. Empathy is not sympathy. They're very, very different. Empathy is about understanding your teams. So there's a lack of training, there's a lack of experience. There is a change happening though, where we see the millennials and the Gen Zs coming through. They're expecting a different level of reward, of environment in their working world, and that is changing. And we'll see that shift really, really fast, particularly this year. And when we look at people going back to work after COVID and now trying to reintegrate into what will be a new normal, those expectations have totally changed, and leaders are now more and more embracing the fact that this is a new normal. It's part of our new normal, is how we lead our people.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly we are seeing more of these kinds of discussions taking place, especially as we continue to discuss the issue around economies recovering from COVID-19. Mimi, before we let you go, who would you recommend this book to? New businesses, people who have been in the corporate world for some time, who would it benefit?
Really, it's going to benefit anyone that's leading a team, whether that's in the workplace, the community, even socially. The book tells my story, so it's a very personal story. It's a very accessible book. It's not a heavy read. And it really just helps anyone that's interested in connecting more deeply, in building camaraderie or cohesion with their teams, in improving performance and output, as we all come back together and really try to rebuild into 2021. So it's a very timely book, and it's very accessible to anyone that's leading a team or a group of people in any social or business environment, and how we can really imbue this leadership to become, as I said, part of our new normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Mimi Nicklin, thank you so much for your time this morning on the AM Report. She's the author of this new book, Softening the Edge, How to Build Empathetic Businesses and How Actually It Can Benefit Your Bottom Line.